just recently, OpenAI made headlines, not for launching a new chatbot or breaking another AI benchmark, but for something much more symbolic. They partnered with Lovefrom, the design firm founded by none other than Johnny Ive, the former chief design officer at Apple, and the man behind iconic products like the iPhone, iPad, and MacBook. Together, they're reportedly building what some are calling the iPhone of AI, a consumer device designed to make artificial intelligence intuitive, beautiful, and personal. Now, here's where it gets interesting. The moment this story broke, Apple stocks dipped. Think about that. Johnny Ive left Apple years ago, but even today, the idea of him joining forces with someone else, someone as disruptive as OpenAI, was enough to shake investors' confidence in the company he helped build. That tells you something. It tells you that loyalty still matters, or at the very least, we still expect it to. But in a world where jobs are temporary, layoffs are common, and side hustles are normalized, what does loyalty even mean anymore? Is loyalty still a virtue in a workplace, a sign of character, trust, and long-term thinking? Or has it become a liability, something that holds people back from better opportunities or healthier work environments? That's what we're unpacking in today's episode of Mind the Gap. Hi, and welcome to Mind the Gap. Stephen, my friend, back from Paris. How are you doing, and how was Paris? Give us a little update.
Yeah, it was great. Spent a week last week in Paris with my company. We made some major announcements regarding our latest product release. We had about 1,000 customers, partners, and industry analysts all together. I mean, as far as the outcome was considered, we had oversubscribed the event. The year before was in the high hundreds, and we were at 1,000. I personally had the opportunity to spend some time with all my team, which was fantastic. I have a remote team, so being able to be there physically with most of them was a real highlight of the trip. And then we got to spend some time doing some fun stuff. I went on a riverboat cruise with some of our top customers and our executives. We went by the Tour Eiffel, or the Eiffel Tower, which was really beautiful. I have some great pictures and video of that. And then we actually did a briefing one day inside the Eiffel Tower, inside their first floor, which is a conference center, which I'd never seen before. Amazing views of the city all around 360. And then on the last night of the show, we did basically a party for the conference, and we did it in an old building that I'm told was a wine cave for the former king of France. I don't know which one it was. And this building dates back to about 1,200 plus years ago. And the cool part about this was that it's actually was featured in the movie Midnight in Paris. So when I walked in, I was like, wait a second, I must have been here before. I've seen this before. And there were these carousels inside the building. It was like it's set up as a fun place, like almost like an indoor amusement park, but very French at the same time. And I looked at the carousels. I'm like, I know these carousels. But was I a kid in these carousels? Like, 25, 50 years ago when I was a kid? No, I saw them in Midnight in Paris, and they're featured in the movie about a third of the way through as a part of the plot. Yeah. So that to me was like, wow, this is so cool. So kudos to my boss, the CMO, who planned the entire event with the whole team and staff of amazing marketers who pulled off a great event for the week. So it was stellar. And it was springtime in Paris. Springtime in Paris.
Beautiful.
Very best time to
Beautiful.
be in Paris.
Yeah, absolutely. I did an event once for a company, and we had just a team event for everybody to get together. And I know what hassle that was to get it done for like 15 people, no guests, just people that worked for us. So I can only imagine what an event manager or the team around event managing has to go through. But yeah, Johnny Ive, OpenAI. Tell me, how did you or what did you hear publicly? I'm pretty sure I've seen it on Instagram. So what have you heard? You obviously have more contacts and connections into that tech industry.
Well, I'll tell you what I know about what's going on in the industry on multiple vectors. the AI industry is a space race. It's like the space race. If you go back to the 1950s, 1960s, where we were competing between multiple countries to be able to launch the first aircraft and spacecraft into space, it's a similar kind of enthusiasm and excitement. The changes are happening so rapidly in AI. You're seeing innovations across all of the public AI endpoints, from the Google Gemini to Chat GPT with OpenAI, with Claude and Anthropic to Microsoft and Copilot and many, many others, Grok as an example. So this space race, this moral equivalent to a space race is drawing talent. And, when I think about the move with Ives' move, obviously he has a tremendous reputation for his perspective on design and the innovations that he was able to achieve with Apple. I think first, and we'll talk about this in detail today, but like our time with companies have an undefined expiration date. There is an expiration date. I think employers have the ability to choose that expiration date. They can do it at will, at least in the United States, and with notice in other countries. Employees have an expiration date, which they determine themselves. And, you look at the kind of history that he had with Apple, with all those successful products. This space race is this new shiny object that effectively AI is the new shiny object for our industry. It only makes sense that the top talent across the entire technology industry would be oriented towards and pulled towards this particular shiny object. This can be a multi-layered decision, so only that person knows why they made that move. When you look at my industry, technology, the shelf life of an employee is very short. And I think it's pretty much an accepted practice because our technologies go through rapid cycles of innovation and refresh. So you're always learning something new. And when you feel like you've kind of tapped out and there's no more to learn at that particular role, at that particular company for that particular technology, it's completely acceptable to say, thanks, guys. It's been awesome. It's time for me to move on.
Would you say that, I mean, now, especially in the AI field, you barely see startups that are disruptive that stay a startup for long. They usually get bought up by the big players, mainly Microsoft. Microsoft is just with an open checkbook walking through the startup world of AI and buying up whatever is likely to have high potential to do something in this space. And I believe that and that's something that I have a little pet peeve with because of my background in sports is that employees are seen as a resource. And sure, we accepted that life cycle, but I feel like if you're trying to build something big, which undoubtedly those companies like OpenAI, like Microsoft are trying to do, I'd say continuity would be something very usable to companies trying to win that race, the space race, as you say.
Well, the talent pool is small, unfortunately. Even if you look across every layer of the stack, most of the people who have adapted, who understand AI, who are involved in one of those layers of the stack, they're in incredibly high demand. I've read somewhere that 29% of employees quit within the first 3 months of starting their new job. I've only done that once because it was a terrible experience. But I could see a lot of younger people getting into some of these companies. And for whatever the reason is, you mentioned companies getting gobbled up and acquired. There's also companies that are running thin on cash and runway. And so a lot of it's situational, but I could see like people getting involved in a company and going, I don't know if there's a route to market here. I don't know if the company will be successful. It's probably not a venture you want to be a part of.
Would you say that in tech companies and especially companies nowadays that are heavy into AI, dynamics of a team have changed? I have understanding, I have an appreciation for how much goes into a company. I just read about the story of the founder of Minecraft, one of the most
Yeah,
successful games in history.
amazing.
How he started in 2009 and in 2014 he averaged I think 15,000 downloads a day and he completely burned out because he made all the money, he had all the success, but for him, he wanted to develop games. He didn't want to have HR problems, lawsuits, etc. pp. The dynamics to a company, and as you said, something as retaining talent to have continuity in what you do, because if you lose your head developer every 6 months, there's going to be disruption, no matter how good you are at putting someone new at the head of the firm. What would you say from your perspective, is there a different dynamic that people just accept it, or is this space something that requires a different dynamic due to the circumstances, of course, but especially due to the different nature of the industry?
It's moving so fast that I think there's casualties as a part of
Hmm.
that. Meaning, if you're not reading and learning and adapting like AI is in your understanding of it, you're going to find yourself overwhelmed by it. I could never read. I do chase a bunch of news feeds. I could never read enough. I could never watch enough, video, explainers. I could never take as many classes as I should. There's never going to be enough time to get it all in. But I think if you're trying to keep current regarding relevant advancements, relevant news, moves, if you're looking at individual companies from an investment perspective, then you're probably reading about what they're doing. You're somewhat conversant and knowledgeable about the news of that company, and you understand kind of the big moves they're making and where they're where they're hitting a stride, customers they're winning, successes, etc., contracts they're obtaining. But if you're not doing that at all, you're going to get, and soon you're going to feel overwhelmed, just as well as the technical curve. There's a debt that's paid that needs to be paid. The more you advance technology, there's also technical debt that's associated because people take basically shortcuts as they build software. So if you're not really kind of sewing up those areas of deficit, both as a professional learning about things that you should be in order to do it the right way, but also doing the right thing in the product to help the customer. There's so much advancement happening that I think that there are a lot of shortcuts that are being taken. It's so hard. There's this level of debt that's associated with this, and if you can't keep ahead of it, it just could be overwhelming, which, by the way, would logically lead to this feeling of being burnt out.
Hmm.
Most employees want to have a balance in their life. Look, type A people who are driven by success or driven by accomplishment, things like that, they're more willing to work harder. They'll rebalance their daily schedules, perhaps unhealthily towards work. But most people want to have that window of time to essentially recharge, to that downtime, to be able to recoup from a very hard day at work. I can tell you personally, our industry is moving so fast. AI is powering. I'm in the networking and enterprise networking space, and that's AI is a huge factor in that market for networking. It's like kind of what's all stitching the whole AI experience together. In fact, the fabric, if you will. But I'm busy all day long.
Hmm.
I get up at 6 o'clock in the morning or 5:30, depending on when my dog gets me up. My alarm clock is the second alert. I'm at it all day, Joel, and
Hmm.
it's reading, research, meetings, it's projects, it's hands on the keyboard work, building, creating documents, creating plans, negotiating with my peers inside the organization on important initiatives and projects. Can you imagine if you're building software or if you're trying to build a brand new product and bring it to market, the kind of sacrifices that people make, right? So if
Hmm.
like majority of employees they want to have that downtime, they want to have a little bit more balance in their lives, but they're driven by this massive force that's pulling them towards this thing called AI that's saying if you don't keep up, you're going to get left behind. The other thing here is we forget so much that it's not just one person. We talked about Ives and Ives and his particular journey and the focus on him, but it's a team of people. He's probably going to
Hmm.
drag 20 people along with him into that venture, and that team. You think about that person is only as good as the team that
Hmm.
supports he or she, right?
Hmm.
So the team, think about what you need to do to keep the team motivated, the team excited, the team engaged, the team healthy. Employees who feel that their company is investing in them are more likely to stay in the job. So we talk about burnout, we
Hmm.
talk about the pressures, we talk about all of the kind of complexity of this new AI world that we're having to deal with. So if the
Hmm.
company is investing in training, professional development, providing them opportunities to learn more and to expand their role, to promotions, rewards, all of the things that are encompassed in what we'll call investment in professional development. These are going to help companies get beyond these rough times where They may be asking their employees to do a little bit more as they close the gap in that space rate.
Hmm. So going back to what you said in the beginning with type A employees that are not seeking the balance in work life, they're just putting in the work. I understand both sides. I know that as an athlete in this case, you have to be out of balance for some time to achieve the greatest things. That's why not a lot of people have them, because it's just if you're trying to build something big, there's not going to be balance. And it's not something you do for 40 years. A question I want to ask you is what was the last time you truly felt loyal to a company and more importantly, what made you feel that way?
Loyalty should be a two-way street. I think, as I mentioned before, we need to be thinking about what how the company operates and how the company perceives the employee and also how the employee perceives the company. It's influenced by multiple factors: rewards, compensation, company culture, position hierarchy, how the company's organized, the goals of the company, those goals reflect the values of that company and the values of the people that work there. My mom worked for like 25 years at this retail company, and
Hmm.
my father worked in shipping and logistics. He was a driver. He was a driver for 35 years, and he actually loved. I mean,
Hmm.
they're both still alive, thank God, and they loved their jobs. They loved what they did. I saw loyalty to his family, less a loyalty to the job. I mean, he had to do the job he did, and he earned a very, very good living. And he actually has had a really, really good retirement as a result of it. If you think back, companies like his in his time period, the companies treated them with a kind of insulated respect. For instance, they provided a pension. These are sort of security blankets. He
Hmm.
worked for a company. He was a part of a union, and
Hmm.
as you know, living in Europe, unions are very pervasive in
Hmm.
protecting workers' rights and such. So there were certain boundaries and certain guardrails that existed in his career that don't exist today in my career. Okay, there's
Hmm.
no union. There's no like, hey, we want you to commit for 20 years here, and we're going to
Hmm.
commit
Hmm.
both ways. You know, we're not going to let you go. You're not going to leave us. That's gone. So I think the two-way street comment that I made earlier, it prevails with respect to the history prior to that, decades ago, and folks like my mom and dad, they stayed, they worked through the good times and the bad times. They had this goal in mind, which was to get all their kids into college and university and get it paid for 100%, which by the way, they did. Thank you, mom and dad. And then they said, when we're done, we're done. Okay.
Hmm.
Today, if I say I'm done at say 65, I'm probably not done. I'm probably
Hmm.
going to be consulting. I'll be on some boards. I'll be kicking in, some additional hours every week to do something of my own interest, but it probably has some compensation associated with it.
Hmm.
I probably will never, my wife always says, you'll never retire. You're probably going to do
Hmm.
this stuff, whether it's technology and business or it's some fun thing like music, which I'm a musician in my background. But whatever it is, I'm probably going to end up doing something that's going to occupy my time. So this whole notion of loyalty is all about perspective today. 20, 30, 40 years ago, it was bound in contracts and safeguards. Those safeguards and contracts no longer exist in the same form. Today, we sign an agreement letter in the United States when we accept a position that says you're an employee at will. And that means
Hmm.
you can leave at any time you choose, and they can ask you to leave at any time they choose. And
Hmm.
so the reality is companies do not have this and employees do not have the same perspective that they did 40 years ago.
There's one saying my dad always says, and it's it drives me crazy because it's true in one way, but it it just goes against my morals. And he always says, if everyone thinks of themselves, everyone's taken care of. It's a two-edged sword, the present right now, and the way jobs work and the industries work, and because we live in a world now that enables us to be very self-centered in the way we build our lives. Not a lot of people, there's still a lot of people that are in need to do any job to make a living, but the sheer amount of people that have the freedom to do whatever they want So it enables us to be more freely with what we want to do as a career and take more time. I'm 24. I don't have a degree yet. I back then my dad was done with whatever he had to do by 21 and started working ever since he was 16. So that freedom we have that freedom now on one hand. We have the freedom to do as we please and to choose the jobs and to leave a job because, it's not what I like and yada yada yada. On the other hand, companies kind of do the same now. As you said, there's a even in countries like in Germany in the tech industry, it's not very different from the US, although we have the workers' rights but the culture is the same. And the culture is such a fast-paced world and you have so many rights as an individual to go and choose as you please, they take out the same right. And on one hand, we value this freedom of choosing in our careers and in our life so much. But on the other side, I think we're lacking in understanding that for companies, they need to adjust to the economy in terms of employees we have. In your opinion, what does a healthy level of loyalty from an employee's perspective look like in 2025? And how is it different from blind loyalty?
I'll tell you that it's similar to faith, it's commitment, right? It's belief, it's faith, and things like that. I do view things pragmatically as it might not last forever. I think I said this in another one of our sessions that, like, when you think about my career and what I've done in my career, I've probably changed jobs, I don't know, maybe 15 times, 35 years, but I've only had one wife for 30 years. And I only have one family.
Yeah.
I've had a few dogs, but that was
Hmm.
nature taking its course, unfortunately, and
Yeah.
I miss them all. But reality is we can have parts of our life which are very consistent and highly committed and highly sort of structured and constricted in some ways is how we operate, which is like, I'm not changing this. I'm not changing this. I've lived in the same house for 20 plus years. So there's that level of commitment to something like that. You've established this relationship with something. And I don't think at work we establish a similar relationship. Of course we don't, right? It doesn't have the
Hmm.
same gravitas. It's not the same kind of importance in our life. We take a job because we feel we can do the job and we need the job, right? So I can't just, at this point in my life, I have a fairly complex life. I've just paid for 3 college tuitions.
Hmm.
Thankfully, like my parents, I was able to do that for my children. But that's a big expense, right? So I've
Hmm.
got to work, right? I've got to work
Hmm.
like you have to work, right? It doesn't matter if you're older, if you're younger, we all have commitments and we have things we have to pay for. So those basic things have to be met. Like, is it a great place to work? Is it great culture? I don't know. Are they doing something cool that's going to be a great impact to my resume? I don't know. I've gone through my career trying to find as many of the things that matter to me, like great company, great culture, great leadership, great compensation for my level, great opportunity to build and grow my function, to
Hmm.
learn more, to develop, to be able to share, to be able to mentor, to be able to coach. Those are my metrics. Okay. Now, the loyalty comes in when I start to see that those things are there. I have worked for some amazing companies that I was extremely sad to leave. I've had the opportunity of working for some incredibly successful companies, world-class
Hmm.
companies. I've also had an opportunity to work for some smaller startups that, in my opinion, were a little bit ahead of their time and they fizzled out because they ran out of cash or they were acquired, and they were integrated and maybe even scrapped in the process.
Hmm.
But I still will tell you that while I was in those things, I was loyal to the company. I was committed. I was driving results because I was driven by the goals, the objectives, the vision and strategy of that company. And I think those are the sort of the elements that bind us to loyalty, which is, do we buy in to the mission, vision, strategy of what we're doing?
Hmm.
If we do buy into it, are we committed to make it a success? And then there's a point where we start to lose faith, just like in a religious context, where we are
Hmm.
challenged by situations which challenge our faith. Are we at a point where we feel like the challenge to our loyalty there at that company?
So let me ask you this. who are we then really loyal to? The loyalty seems to be very closely binded to the circumstances you face. And to my understanding, loyalty is like in a marriage, in good and in bad times. In times where it's rough and in times where you have to invest more than you get out to keep the thing afloat. So who are we really loyal to nowadays as employees, but also as employers?
Look, the job of any leader, any executive in a corporation, especially in a publicly traded company, is to be able to drive the company to a level of success that benefits its stakeholders and its shareholders. And I think we the companies are very abstract in this. I mean, they're very well structured from a legal perspective, but they're very abstract, like an organism is abstract. It's the company operates very much like a biological organism. There are obviously some boundaries and guardrails around how it operates, has to legally, but internally, there's a lot of variability and fluidity on how teams operate, how goals get set, how the organism all kind of moves in the same, hopefully in the same direction. Like a leader in a big company, let's say 5,000 person company or 10,000 or 50,000, 100,000 person company, there's no way that an individual like a CEO can have eyes on everything that's going on. They have to
Right,
trust, right? So
right.
you have departments and divisions and functions, and you have to trust the leaders of those individual entities. And the
Mm-hmm.
hope is that, like an organism, they all kind of do what they're supposed to do. Like, an organism that fights viruses in your body, right?
Mm-hmm.
Something that does is responsible, like an antibody, something that actually
Mm-hmm.
is responsible for fighting off, an infection. But you can't control it. You can put out sort of the basic rules and guardrails, as I said, but it's hard to control it. So at the end of the day, the loyalty is really a small circle. It's not a really big circle. I mean, in
Mm-hmm.
my father's time, he had this feeling of his very strong work ethic. So
Mm-hmm.
he's thinking, I need to please my boss. I need to please the division head that runs his particular territory. I need to please our CEO. He may never even have interacted with the people up in the upper layer, but
Mm-hmm.
he's got this blind loyalty to the company because he's like, if I want my pension, if I want to keep getting paid, then I'm going to need to work hard. And if I work hard, my boss is going to look good and their boss is going to look good. And the CEO of the company is going to be thankful. All us individuals are all doing what we're supposed to do. And it's to my point of the organism. If we all do what we're supposed to do, and we all try very hard at doing the right thing, but I think if everybody does what they think is the right thing and they all are working towards a common goal, that organism kind of moves and does what it's supposed to do. But I
Mm-hmm.
think when you're inside that organism, it's those molecules that are really close to you that enable you to develop that level of loyalty. Just
Mm-hmm.
like a platoon, a small team inside the military would be, obviously inside that, like the SEAL team, for instance, would have established these bonds and have this basically this unbroken level of loyalty to one another because they built this together. They're on a mission. I think you see a similar scenario emerge inside of a corporation where your team becomes that sort of small family and then
Mm-hmm.
you have a commitment to one another. So I think the loyalty is in the smallest circle. And then it's as you start to fan out the circles, the loyalty becomes less and less and less.
I came in to this episode. I was like, I think loyalty has changed in its meaning, not loyalty itself, but the meaning of loyalty in today's society and especially in the workplace. But I kept going back to something that Bill Belichick, legendary New England Patriots head coach, and now at North Carolina, always preached is you can't do someone else's job. And what you just said, I love it because the loyalty that you have towards an organization is expressed through your actions, through your consistency, and through your efforts, and through the success you get with what you do. It's like just on a football field. If I'm not loyal to my team, to my quarterback, to my receiver in
Mhm.
football, I'm not going to get the job done. But if I am, if everything in my head is riding on that guy behind me standing up straight and the D lineman not getting to him, that's loyalty to the cause. That's loyalty to the people around me. I understand from that perspective when people say, well, I know what I'm putting in. I know what my successes are for this company. I created this amount of revenue. I build up this amount of people in my team, etc. To then say the level of loyalty that's coming back on that two-way street just means more from that new company that's offering me more money or better benefits or whatever it is. So I'd say I obviously haven't been around 40 years ago in the job market, but from the things I hear and from the biggest point of critique of feedback that I get from my parents' generation that say, well, why are you kids just switching your job every year, every 2 years? That's a lack of loyalty. You're not willing to put in the work. I'd say it changed. The industry's changed. The tech industry changed. Like I'm in a software as a service area right now, which is not quite as disruptive as AI, but it can be. Uh, so I would argue that loyalty hasn't changed. It just adjusted to the faster paced environment we live in.
I mean, it's to my point, the commitment that we have to one another is we create a bond with one another so we can be loyal to one another because we create a personal connection. And it's like if you ever saw somebody like you mentioned on the field, if you saw somebody struggling, you'd have their back, right?
Uh-huh.
And
Uh-huh.
the loyalty is is earned and it's developed because of how we act and behave. We see others stepping up. We see others helping. We see others collaborating and sharing, and we feel safety from that. And then the guard comes down, and then you develop the relationship. And the more we relate to one another's job, the more we relate to their responsibilities and the pressures that one another have, the bonds are created. And that's where we establish this sense of loyalty. That's why I say this is very local. I
Uh-huh.
can't tell you what from 3 companies ago, what our earnings were in Q3 of that year.
Uh-huh.
I can
Uh-huh.
tell you that I remember the people. I remember the projects. I remember the high fives. I remember
Uh-huh.
the words of encouragement we gave each other. I don't remember the quarterly numbers. So I think it starts with that level of loyalty that is developed between individuals.
Uh-huh.
The team's resilience and ability to soldier on and to continue to move forward, I think it all boils down to the people and the relationship you build on the field, in the boardroom, inside the office, outside the office, in your personal life. I always think of the people. I never think about the company as it's, from a historical perspective. I remember the products that we had. I remember the great projects that we were a part of. I remember the high fives and things like that, but I don't remember all the details of, the experience outside of that. To me, it is a journey unto itself. This developing your career, who you surround yourself around. I've had the great opportunity of having repeat runs with the same people, like literally
Uh-huh.
like bosses that have continued to hire me and bring me into the next venture and the next venture, as well as me bringing people along for the ride as well. And, sometimes you can do that and you can capture the lightning in the bottle, that
Uh-huh.
expression. It's like that's that energy, that excitement, enthusiasm, and capturing that in a bottle. Sometimes that works. Sometimes when you replay the same team in a different company, it doesn't work.
Uh-huh.
So
Uh-huh.
that experience sometimes changes and morphs that you had in the first company, and you get into the next context, the next company, and it might not be the same. That's not to say it's bad. It's just going to be different. So you lose a leader, that's a big impact. You move to a new company, you try to bring people with you, it's going to be different.
Uh-huh.
But those kinds of things are going to establish, in my opinion, challenges to teams, challenges to you as a leader, and how your level of resilience is going to effectively be the measure of success. Your level of resilience to weather through the storm, and new leader, new culture, new opportunities, new challenges, new objectives, new missions. Those are going to be the
Uh-huh.
challenges, the headwinds that you're going to have to face, and it's going to test that loyalty.
Awesome. Stephen, thank you so, so much. For everyone listening, I hope you enjoyed. And as always, my good friend, Stephen, the last words of this episode and everyone coming are yours.
Look, this is a great session. I'm filled with a bunch of fantastic memories of companies I've worked for. Again, I've worked for way too many companies. I feel like it's both blessing and a curse. You make your circle bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. There's so many amazing people in my network that I absolutely adore, that I would love to take to every company that I go to. I've said this before to people after we've worked together and we created that level of trust, intimacy, and then the loyalty we have for one another. And I've said, you're in my family now. So wherever I go, you go with me. And you always try to do that. You always try to bring people with you because you want to recapture that great, amazing experience and feeling. But I get so many calls from people and so many people reach out. And I want to give words of encouragement to those who are having a hard time finding a fit in a new company or having a hard time finding that job. My last words here would be, don't give up. Lean on your network. Lean on those people who you consider your coaches, your mentors, your guides, people who you consider, you respect, your former leaders, people, your colleagues, peers, people that even worked for you. Find those opportunities to reconnect with one another, continue to build those bonds, and leverage those people for advice, for wisdom, and maybe through one of those conversations, you might find a way to the next best career role opportunity. So don't give up.